I call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the May 4th study session of your Ashland City Council. We have two items on our agenda this evening, the facility planning study next steps and the review of City Council budget. We also have Councilor Kaplan who is joining us by Zoom this evening. Sabrina.
Yep, so first up tonight, we're going to talk about the facility planning study next steps. And just as a reminder, Council requested and funded this study last biennium, and so we completed it this biennium. We brought it forward a few times, and so tonight we're looking for Council to give staff guidance of where they would like to go to next. So Scott is going to present kind of 3 or 4 options for you all. I think tonight it would be nice to start thinking about, are there any options we can eliminate so we can start kind of moving forward with getting council the information they need to make a decision for us to move forward if that's the desire. So that is our goal tonight. And with that, I'll hand it over to Scott.
And so just so that we've got the context set, we're not looking tonight to zero in on one particular option necessarily.
So I think if you're there, great. But otherwise, if you know there's one lane you don't want to go down, we can start just kind of
whittling
knocking
down
those off, because I realize it's kind of a lot of information, a lot of options. And so if there's somewhere we don't want to go, I think that would be helpful for us.
Great, thank you. Hi, Scott.
So as I start this presentation, I want to say I'm not the droid you're looking for. Thank you. Good night.
Nice. Happy May the 4th. Yes.
So just a friendly reminder, as Sabrina said, we started this project off in 2024 with 2 phases and a goal associated with each phase. The first phase was to conduct a full facility condition assessment of all of our workable, livable buildings. McKinstry came in and they went through every facility, itemized all of our equipment and appurtenances for all of those facilities, and generated a pretty robust report with recommendations for maintenance and improvements and some planning level costing for all of the buildings. And that's broken down into their condition assessment report. The second portion of this project was to develop a space needs and facility plan, how the city should go about using their facilities moving forward, how they should be managed, potentially divested of. As part of that overall process, we presented kind of that high-level overview at the special study session in January, both the McKinstry report and the ORW report. And so we're here again tonight to kind of talk about those options and kind of next steps. One of the things that's come up in the interim is some information about City Hall and some additional cost estimates requested by the City Council and some breakdowns financially of what that would look like based on when the Deputy City Manager was here and presented some information on City Hall and the relocation of staff to the community center. So McKinstry had some cost estimates. The commercial inspector who inspected City Hall in January also put together some cost estimates for what primary and secondary mitigation improvements would look like from a cost basis. We know that there was a cracked rafter. We know there's electrical issues. We know the roof is in severely poor condition, and the HVAC systems are at the end of their useful life. And so what staff did is, first of all, we resolved the rafter issue. That repair has been completed by Vitus Construction. We also asked S&B James and Vitus to give us kind of costing breakdowns for mitigating the electrical, repairing the roof or replacing the roof, and also upgrading the rooftop HVAC units to standard equipment. And so those are kind of planning level costs that we've got, and I think you've seen those via email as well. Those costs don't include permitting costs, structural calculations that would be required, any sort of additional electrical analysis needed for the rooftop units. We know right now that conditioned space should probably be looked at and recommendations made for what the units should be moving forward. If you've been in City Hall, when employees are in there, there's a space heater in some rooms, there's air purifiers in some rooms, so we would want some level of MEP analysis and some performance specs developed to recommend a good path for HVAC upgrades. And then the roofing replacement cost doesn't include any sort of substructure repair. We all have a pretty good feeling based on the water intrusion that there's some substructure repair that will be needed as part of that process as well. So we have all those, in hand. Next steps would be kind of council direction on the outcome of the deed restriction issue that legal has kind of talked about with the council over the last few months, and kind of resolution of that moving forward as part of the City Hall project. So we kind of have a good idea of target level costing right now.
So Scott, help me understand something. So we, 6 years ago, in 2019, late 2019, we did all of this analysis for City Hall. And we had a very different number than $3.4 million. The numbers that we got at that point said it was kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in terms of tearing it down and rebuilding it exactly like it was, or doing these very kind of deep, full system repairs because every mechanical system was at the end of its useful life. We have asbestos in that space, we think, somewhere. We've got seismic problems that are much more difficult to fix than to simply take away and start from scratch with. And we came out of there with a bond number that was, I believe, $7.2 million. And so when the council and the public are looking at these numbers, how do we understand these numbers in relation to those?
So the bond measure also included the renovations to Community Center and Pioneer Hall and the police station addition, which was $1 million. And then I forget the exact number for Community Center and Pioneer Hall, but it was around $900,000 to $1 million as well. What ORW did with that, I believe, is that also includes the kind of interior remodel of City Hall to make it a more efficient space. What you're looking at now, these numbers are just kind of in-kind replacement and not improving the functionality or circulation of the building itself. So that doesn't include the interior remodeling of the facility itself, or kind of any changes to the ADA structure based on meeting space, office locations, and things of that nature.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Councilor, I think Bloom was here, and then we've got Sherelle.
Great, thanks, Scott. So a couple things. So I notice in the packet it's here, but there's the roof patch quotes, and those are 44 from Hogue, and JAM was 23,778. So that's a possibility. That's a route we could go as well, is doing the patch.
Yeah, and they wouldn't recommend that. The only thing that patching is going to do from a warranty basis is they're warranting the material. They're not warranting the work. And they have very little confidence based on the conversations that it would do any beneficial good for the facility to continue to patch it. Their recommendations across the board are to completely replace the membrane roof.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that context. That's really helpful. Could I do a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
The other question I had was about, we were talking about, the clean title and the deed and all that. But as far as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the council could decide to go forward with full repair of City Hall, all that's recommended technically, without needing to get the clean title. That's a kind of a separate conversation.
That's correct, but staff's recommendation, I think, from the legal basis and city management is to wait until the restriction is satisfied one way or the other.
Okay.
Councilor Sherelle?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Scott. And I'm gonna just push on some of these numbers real quick, not at you. I realize we asked you for this, but the last direction I kind of remember, and looking through my notes, was like we gave direction as a body to potentially look at like patching some things up to get it to not continue to further decay while we come up with a plan via legal, like you just mentioned. So just like looking at that, how do we whittle these numbers down? Like we asked about potentially doing some electrical in-house. The patchwork, at least the more expensive patch with the four handle, had a 5-year watertight guarantee. That was half of the warranty, the workmanship and material warranty of a product that was 5 times its price. So like, I see the higher numbers. Can we shave down the electrical by doing some stuff in-house? Can we do pest control? Can we just do the patch? Can we get the building to a spot where it won't decay for a much smaller number? Did we look at that, or was everybody like, it's not worth it?
So what we did is, so minor electrical has been repaired and resolved. So the unboxed splices have all been taken care of internally by our in-house electrician. We would do the hot water heater replacement and the pest control internally. That's something, pest control we do naturally for all of our other buildings. So going in and filling voids and gaps and doing pest control is something our facilities crew would be doing. The roofing and HVAC and major electrical upgrades and replacement is something that we would contract out. One of the things that we talked about, and I think I mentioned this the last meeting when it came up about efficiencies and costing, is we've talked about this internally as staff, is doing a design build instead of a design bid build for this, and get a contractor guaranteed maximum price early on for any additional work that might come out of a discussion with the council as part of this process.
Yeah, and if I can follow up on that, Mayor, and I totally agree with you, and I think we'll have more control over pricing, we'll have more control over the contract, I think, if we eliminate one of those three legs. And just a thought too, when we're dealing with HVAC, when we're dealing with a high quality commercial contractor, we should be expecting those calculations, those restrictive flows with their bid. Electrical, like if they're doing electrical work from a professional contractor, we should be getting load calcs with those estimates. Like that shouldn't be an additional engineering cost ever, especially for a job with this scope, I wouldn't think.
We didn't give them any information as part of their analysis. They went to the site, they visited the site in an afternoon, and then came up with unit costs based on their best assumptions of typical type. So what we would do is refine what that looked like if we did a design build. We would ask them, because they're gonna have to produce those calculations for building permits as part of the process, and structural calcs for the building permits. If we retain the parapet wall structurally as part of that. So we would make sure in the design portion that we would require architect, engineer to produce all of that to get to that guaranteed maximum price by the contractor.
Got it, but just to clarify, that would come from the contractor. We're not having a separate line item for engineering.
No,
Okay.
not in a
Okay.
design build, correct.
Okay, got
Yes.
it. Thank you for making that clear, because it was kind of muddy to me, and I understand this pretty well, so thank you.
Councillor Hanson, and then Duquesne.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Scott and City Manager, for getting quotes on these patches as well as replacement, like we asked a couple sessions ago. I want to clarify a little bit. So when you were speaking to the contractors, S&B James and Adroit, I assumed that's the context which they said, we don't recommend patching, we recommend redoing the whole roof. But as Councilor Sherrill pointed out, there's a warranty associated with these patches. So do you feel like it's still a fool's errand to do the patch to shore up the weatherproofness? I mean, even if we sell City Hall, I believe, we'd want to sell it in good, fair order, and we would consider doing the patch anyways. But could you clarify a little bit on that?
So I would say it's tripping over a dollar to pick up a nickel in a certain aspect, especially if you're looking to do the RTUs as well, because you're removing them and replacing them in penetrations that already exist up there. So you will have obviously additional points of weakness, whereas if you did both at the same time, you could, shore everything up and prevent any leaks and any sort of substructure damage. Right now, if they patch and you continue to have leaks and they come out and try to patch again, you're still having that intrusion of moisture into the substructure and to the rest of the facility, which exponentially creates more issues.
Right. So you really are not considering a patch?
That's the policy direction by the council. I would not recommend it. I would recommend.
Yeah, as a facilities
replacing-
person, you were saying you do not
Yes, I would
recommend it
recommend
categorically.
replacing the whole roof. And then you
Beyond-
have a 20, 25-year warranty associated with that.
So in addition to SME James and Adroit, our facilities department saying no patch too?
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
So Scott, I have a follow-up to that question. When the idea of the patch came up, it wasn't as a way of solving this problem. I don't think that doesn't make any sense for any kind of long-term process. The question, I think, was about, does it make sense to put a new roof on a building that you might next year tear down? right? It's to buy some time for this community to decide what to do with this building without having it deteriorate in the meantime. So when we think about that, how do you think about that element as opposed to the patch that just we think solves our problem, but the patch that keeps the deterioration from getting worse while we figure the rest of this out?
So based on previous council direction and policy, the direction back in 19, I believe, was to not tear the building down and is to restore it from the inside out. So if council direction changes from that impact, then I would say we would take a different approach or look at it. But that is, from my knowledge, where the direction was pushed. So that's kind of my mindset, is to align with that still. So I would replace the roof and the HVAC system, and then you would, do your interior demolition and then rehabilitation.
And I know that was before your time, so I don't want to put you on the spot. What the council had originally decided to do is to tear the building all the way down. The council voted to do that. And then the public came forward, and they really didn't want that to happen to the historic building. And so what ended up happening was kind of a hybrid of keeping those external walls, but literally taking everything else out. And that included the roof going away, then blocking up those walls, and then rebuilding kind of from the inside, lifting, exactly like you say, Scott. But essentially, if this council or this community were to go down that path again, the roof goes away in that process. And that's the question. And it's my understanding as well, Sabrina, we don't have money for a new roof right now, do we?
So anything we do to any of our buildings that's large scale at this point would need to come out of the contingency of the general fund.
Okay. Councilor Duquesne.
Thank you. Okay, let me see. That was a lot of information. And thanks, Scott. I heard mention the word warranty a couple of times, and the patch versus the whole roof itself. And so something that I wanted to share is that Bleezer Build Roofing in 2014 did partial work on the roof. And when it did the partial roof work on the roof, it had a 20-year warranty, and it still has 12 years left on that warranty. And I saw the other 4 people here who have given quotes to repair. I have a copy of it right here. Actually, I was given a couple of copies that I can give to the recorder. You can have one too if you'd like. So my question is looking at Bleezer, they're still in business. I Googled them really quick. And they repaired the roof partially in 2014 for $8,000. And I don't see them as part of the people that a bid could have possibly gone out to, because I'm trying to look at different ways that we can do this cost effectively. And if you want to, I have copies for the other council, or I could just send you the email. So do we have, my question is have we looked at Blesser and looked at the opportunity of them giving us a bid for the remainder of it? And if we have this warranty that has a 12-year life left on it, I think if you have a warranty, you call the people out and they come and repair what's not holding up. Have we done that?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that 2014 contract and information, and our new facility staff wouldn't be, because none of the old facility staff who enacted any of that are around anymore, so they wouldn't be aware of that. So that would be something we'd have to look into.
Well, Scott,
and just make sure that it's in the location where the leaking is currently happening, of which they repaired in 2014 as well.
But I think that it warrants the opportunity to call them in and have them look at the roof. They did it for $8,000. It was very cost effective. Just like Councilor Sherrill brought up the opportunity of shaving the cost and getting the job done. We have 12 years left on this warranty, so it behooves us to call them and ask them to take a look at the roof in its entirety, and it might be part of what they repaired. As a homeowner, that's what I would do, and I think anyone else would do that too.
And so just a reminder, the council direction was to get estimates. So since we don't have an identified funding source, this hasn't been put out for bid, which is why we're looking at estimated figures. So just also keeping that in mind. Councilor Bloom.
Thanks, Mayor. So this is all great conversation and great information that is readily available here in the packet. And so I'm kind of looking at this, and I'm looking to Sabrina to help me here, is when I'm looking at this agenda item, I'm thinking of it in a few questions that we're being asked to answer. Do we want to invest the money and do the repairs on City Hall? And that's where we want to focus our attention. Do we want Civic Center A or B location? And I know there's a couple options within that. And then the other question is about these assets that we have, these properties, and if we want to divest of them, which ones do we? All of them, none of them, one of them, whatever that is. Is that high level how we should be thinking about this? Because then that informs the more narrow questions of where we go, rather than talking about something that we might just say, never mind to.
Yeah, I think would be helpful. So, Scott's going to go through, the Briscoe Civic Center option, the consolidated campus in this location, kind of just rehabbing all of our existing buildings. And so in my mind, what would be helpful, because we need to do a lot more due diligence to provide you with costing and estimates and whatnot. If we can have a lane there,
Right.
that's kind of the high level. But I think because we've had this City Hall issue come up and information has been requested, we want to make sure you have that information as we're having this discussion. So I don't think we're looking for an answer in this moment about City Hall. I think this is just kind of information to have in the back of your mind as we move through this discussion. And then we will want council direction eventually on how we want to move forward, because we'll need you to authorize the budget supplemental.
Quick
Yeah.
follow-up
Yeah.
to that. So again, so I guess what I'm trying to prevent is us spinning our wheels, spending staff time and money and resources going down a path that we might not want to be going down. And so I'm wondering if really the question before us to answer first is, do we want a civic center or do we want to invest in City Hall? And then that then answers whether you guys keep going down the path of getting cost estimates on the civic center or City Hall.
I don't think
For
they're
no-
mutually exclusive, honestly. I think you could have a consolidated campus, and I know the community very much feels passionate about City Hall. I don't think it has to necessarily remain like the civic element. There could be other uses for that building where we don't necessarily have to divest of it. I think it's pretty obvious that we're not going to have a consolidated campus there. So if that's the wish, I think we need to kind of decide where that consolidated campus would be. And then, if we want to retain City Hall and use it, maybe council offices are there, or there's a meeting space, or it becomes, where the chamber and a visitor center is. Like, I think there's options for that building that are kind of outside of the consolidated campus. But I think in terms of information Scott and I would like is, if we want to move towards a consolidated campus, we kind of need to pick that lane. And then also we have all of these other buildings, so not just City Hall, but Briscoe, if we're not going to go down that lane, that we're going to want council to provide direction on in terms of divesting, because there's kind of a domino effect of, we don't want to go out for a bond while we still hold all this property, because that money makes the bond significantly less, right? And that should be invested into our facilities.
So really we need to decide if we want a civic campus or not,
I think that's the question.
first and foremost. Right?
So what we're going to do, because this part of the conversation was wrapping up, I think it was important to have this at the beginning, because otherwise there would be a lot of questions around what about the information coming back for City Hall. Scott, I'd like you to keep going with your presentation. Councilor Duquesne, did you have something specific before we head on? And then Councilor Dale.
The reason why I brought up the roof is because we were talking about City Hall, so I will hold on to this information that I have. And this was signed in 2014, and Scott, your signature is on this. So I wanted to be able to talk about ways of shaving it off. I understand that we are in the lane now of do we want or don't we want the civic center, the community, so I will stay with that for now, and we can go down that path. But I will come back to the cost of the roof when we come back to it.
So Councilor Duquesne, it looks like you've had that information so that you could make the copies. Did Scott get that before this meeting?
No, I just got the copies right now.
Okay, thank
I
you.
just was able to do them.
All right. And Councilor Dale, you said you're...
I can wait, Mayor,
can
no
hold.
problem.
Okay, go ahead, Scott.
So During the January special study session, the council asked for some additional information regarding the options of the Civic Complex at 90 North Mountain or Briscoe. Council asked for kind of, what are we looking at from a construction cost basis for additional square footage associated with either campus option? And so the numbers I pulled directly from the McKinstry study, they average about $400 to $650 per square foot for new facility construction. And that kind of pullout from the study was in your packet showing kind of the cost per building type per square foot. City Council asked for information on the divestment properties that have been in discussion, what that appraisal information looks like. So in the packet, there's the Imperatrice property appraisal, B Street, Briscoe, North Mountain, City Hall, and the Hardesty House property. All of those appraisals are in your packet. Some of them are dated. They go back to 2021. Some of them are much newer, but that gives you a relative scale, kind of what we're talking about, you know, from potential divestment income that could be used to go into. What the council also asked for is, where do we establish money for capital projects and how do we hold that? And so that's been established as the Capital Improvement Fund, the 410 fund. So anything associated with facility planning and management and improvement and maintenance, we'll all try to budget for directly in the 410 account moving forward. So that'll be a big thing as we move through the next budget process for the next biennium. There was also a question about community engagement and looking at the options and what kind of feedback the council could get from the community just as a standalone. So as part of that, administration put up the survey on the website with the 3 questions about the Civic Campus, City Hall. And so primarily right now, out of the 159, I think, survey responses, about 70% were for a Civic Campus complex. And then lastly, there was a question about balancing, you know, operations with downtown vibrancy and how does that look and mesh, you know, from a city government standpoint, from an economic impact standpoint. And so the deputy city manager pulled out information from the economic opportunities analysis that was in that report, and I will defer those questions in that direction because that is not my lane at all.
Councilor Dale.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Scott. Sorry, I went heads down. I was using a calculator here for just a second. And maybe this is for Jordan and Sabrina, but the 410, the CIP account for the dedicated facilities funding, just so I'm clear, is that an existing CIP account or fund, or are we spinning up a separate facilities fund too, or are we just going to use this one? Or is this the one that we were talking about spinning up last meeting?
So we already had a facilities fund.
Right.
Created, so
Right.
now we would like to put money in it.
Okay, so this is the container.
the
for-
dedicated
This is the new
facilities
one.
fund.
Okay, thank you.
So I wanted to see if Councilor Kaplan has had any thoughts or questions.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm having a, no, I'm trying to also see it on her.
We're having some trouble hearing you, Councilor.
I think I am. No question this time.
Oh, no questions at this time? Okay.
Driving through a tunnel.
Likewise, I've been communicating with Jordan about my problems.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions in front of us this evening, specifically about which of these options we want to consider, to keep considering going forward. And it gets, I think, even more interesting because there is so much movement in other major community anchors at the moment. And so figuring out what this looks like for us, there's a whole lot of movement happening with other properties, potentially with other facilities and sites with some of our partners. There's a lot that potentially that could come up at some point in the future. Let's have a conversation generally about the importance of having consolidated services. Is there an interest in having that in some place initially, and then from there we can maybe whittle down on sites that we might be interested in. And then I would like to have a conversation before we leave today about potential phasing. And what might we do initially that protects our ability to permanently consolidate in the future, but doesn't potentially lock us in too early before we can see what else is happening in the community. So, Councilor, who would like to go next? Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, so I mean, I certainly see the benefits of a consolidated civic campus. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I just look at where we are right now as a municipality, as a community, as a country, as a state, in terms of the economy and finances. And I think that without, this idea of a bond, that's one way to do it. But I know that there was also a point made about, well, this is going to help inform the budget. And I don't want to get into a situation where we're talking about a bond and then having to backfill on the budget. And then now we have a gap in other areas in the general fund. And now we're going to have to talk about fees or cuts in order to fill that. So I just feel at this point, at least for the next few years, that it would really benefit us to take a step back and say, let's divest of these properties we have. Let's build up this facilities fund. Let's get some of this really important deferred maintenance we need done on the buildings that we do have, and see where certain conversations might go with some of these other anchor institutions that might have facilities. The legislature, Representative Marsh, done a great job bringing in over $40 million in capital funding for SOU buildings that, could potentially be empty in a couple of years, and that might create some opportunities for the city to step in and maybe move in there. So I think right now is a great time to pause and wait and see kind of where the trade winds go over the next few years.
Councilor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I tend to agree with Councilor Bloom, although maybe the timeline's a little bit different. I don't know if it's a few years from now, but I think at the very least what I'm looking at is I just need to see what the budget is going to do, because I feel like we're doing this kind of backwards, and I understand trying to figure this out and so that it can inform a budget. But until I understand what the budget is and what our facilities uses are and how that, I think it actually informs it the other way. I'm not adverse to investing in buildings to the point that we don't have them fall down. But I'm curious to see in the next, I'll call it months instead of years, of what kind of funding we can do relative to divesting of certain property and looking at what we're doing as we come into 27, 29, because I know we're going to shift some things relative to the budget and see, and I know we're very interested in trying to figure out if we can build that initial facilities fund very quickly, and that would inform some. So I thought, when I look back at our notes, we were going to have this discussion kind of in the July, August timeframe, but I understand we're kind of moving it up, and that's okay. But I see the efficiencies. I don't know the answer to it until I see what our budget's going to look like.
Councilor Duquesne.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to underline what was said earlier. In a perfect world, I think this would be a wonderful opportunity. However, I agree, 2 years. I think even longer than that, because we have to recuperate from the state that we're in right now. When I look at our budget, in my opinion, the Civic Center should just be taken off the table. We have to address what's in front of us right now. I heard the word budget. We need to get out of our structural deficit. And when we keep spending more money out than we bring in, it's not sustainable. And right now, I don't believe that the residents of Ashland can afford another bond or another cost. Divesting of properties, I think, is great. Putting that money into a facilities fund, I think, is good. But we need to be selective of the properties that we do divest of. So I don't support a civic center, not now, not in a couple of years. We have to fix what's in front of us first. We have to get to the black.
Councilor Hanson?
Thank you. Well, I'm really curious in hearing staff's presentation on the Civic Center options. We do have a laundry list of improvements. We have some opportunities with some capital divestment. All that's on the table. I would love to get us into a civic center, given a good enough plan and a realistic timeline. We've been kicking the can on City Hall, and now we're in a crisis. Previous councils have kicked the can, and here we are talking about kicking the can again. So I would rather not do that, but I would like to engage in a pragmatic approach that will phase in one of these options. And yeah, we need to know all the moving parts before we can start eliminating things that we don't want to do. Looking forward to the presentation. And then Civic Center needs a financial model. And divestment of properties, sure, which ones and how are we, I don't think we should divest of all of our inventory, but we want to build up this capital fund. So more than anything, I'd like to see us get a plan and some action here. Thank you.
Councilor Sherrill.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to kind of echo all the thunder that's already gone on, like I think in a perfect world, this is awesome, and I would love to support it, and I would love to see a clear path to how we fund it without raising the cost burden on our ratepayers and our citizens in Ashland. And I think the longer term focus right now should be on like, how do we keep staff? How do we stay whole? I think we should be looking down the road with a little bit more hawkish view, maybe a little more bearish, to protect the community, to protect people's pocketbooks and to protect the staff we have. And I mean, just doing a little bit of rough math, if we're looking at remodel costs in the 300 to 400 and new build, and the average between 5 and 450 and 525, if we sold the buildings that are on our potential divestment list at or near appraised value, and we compare that to the chart that came forward a couple meetings ago, when we look at the long-term capital improvement costs of the buildings we already have, that's not even enough money. Like if we sold all the buildings on our dispo list and started a facilities fund and started a 5, 10, and 15-year plan based on the red, yellow, green colors, like we would need that money to maintain what we have. And I don't want to say like, you don't throw away your toys, you take care of the ones you have. It's no fault of anybody's, but we're at an inflection point where we have a lot of work to be done. We're not getting any more money. The cost to operate is way more than we're bringing in, and that's only projected to get worse. And that's in every category. That could be the school district, it could be SOU, it could be, you just name them. So I think longer term, we should be looking at consolidating and putting together this potential civic campus with other groups that are facing the same problems that we are, be it the school district, or maybe it's SOU, maybe it's OSF. But partnering and being better together, as opposed to like, right now everybody's struggling independently, it seems like, with expenses rising faster than cost recovery, if we call it. So I like the idea. I mean, I'm kind of having a little bit different position than the last time we saw this and directed you to spend time and money. Like that's kind of a miss. I admit that in my own part. But I think that we need to be focusing on other things right now and letting people get back to work on the things that are here and now as well. Thanks.
Councilor Dale.
I appreciate the quick follow-up, Mayor, and I just wanted to be very clear, because I wasn't on the first time around, that I want to double click on what Councilor Hansen is saying, which is I have zero interest in kicking this can down the road. I think that's been done for far too long. I am very interested in investing in our facilities, as we should. I just want to be as informed as possible. I have no desire to make this a next council's problem. So thanks for bringing that up, Councilor.
Councilor Kaplan.
And I will be speaking on Kaplan's behalf. He has sent in a comment to read aloud. I'm on the same page with the comments I've heard from others. Before going on to a consolidated civic campus, I'd like a clearer picture than we got from ORW regarding business process changes expected over the next decade and how that affects quality of service we can offer by co-locating parts of our team. In this context, I'm for fixing what we've got.
So I have some thoughts as well. I think a couple of things. When we look at master plans, we typically look as they're very prescriptive and you need to do this on these dates and that sort of thing. But this is a master plan report, so it's a framework for how we make decisions. And I think that's what we're building off of here. And so there's a lot of latitude about what we can decide to do and which way we can go. I appreciate the budget issues, and also the fact that none of this gets built within our existing budget, by my mind. maybe some of the repair work, there might be some elements here and there, but there is just still going to be a gap, almost no matter which direction we go. And so the community eventually will decide whether anything gets built or not. And what we know from the condition report is that a lot of our buildings are not going to be able to hold up without some level of investment, and a decent level of investment, because a lot of this has been kicked down the road. As we have these continual strains on our local budgets, what that has turned into for us and lots of places is that maintenance gets deferred, and at some point the bill comes due, and we are at that point in many of our buildings, not just City Hall, but several others are right behind it. And so one of the things that I've been continuing to think of since I put the proposal in front of the council that was included in your packet is kind of thinking about what does it look to phase some of this in. So what would it look like to deal with City Hall? And when I say deal, I want to be clear that I am absolutely not in favor of putting another staff person in that building until the seismic problems are fixed. I think it's irresponsible. And I don't support that at all. So when I say we handle City Hall, I mean we handle it. Whatever it's going to be, we decide with this community what it's going to be, who's going to be there, what it's going to do, hopefully a long-term revenue stream for it, and fully handle it. At the same time, we could consolidate staff potentially on a campus in town, depending on what facilities become available. We could still start that efficiency move without waiting. Right now, we've got people over by the Y, we've got people in the community center, we've got people in ComDev, we've got people over at the Grove. That does not lead us to a solid operational space. But there are likely to be opportunities that come in the very near future to consolidate them somewhere that is not a brand new civic campus and get us moving towards that efficiency space. In addition to whatever repairs the community wants to do with City Hall, we could also use this opportunity for any other major investments in the buildings that we want to hold and protect for a potential future campus. So if we're thinking that it's likely to be here, then maybe we also make sure that we do whatever sorts of repairs hold these buildings steady in this space. So not doing anything new, not doing any major build outs, but just basic fundamental maintenance and longevity protection in these spaces. What that would do would be to allow us to get a little further down the road and see what happens without ignoring some of the issues that are going to take away the value of our buildings. If we do want to use them later on in the future, we need to protect that value. So I think that, that would be where I would be leaning in all of this, is to take that phased approach. We need to put the question in front of this community what it wants to do with this City Hall. What I've heard and makes sense to me is that from an operations standpoint, it doesn't make sense to have our people scattered. But I also know that buildings are not going to sell, land is not going to sell immediately. This is not something that is, 2 months later, we're going to have a bunch of money to put in the bank. So there's a process to this, I think, that we need to be kind of thinking about at a strategic level, dealing with City Hall, dealing with the immediate repairs, and then dealing with the divestment of whatever properties we are going to divest of and see where that gets us. And then this council can come back to that question at whatever point in the future and say, is it enough how we've consolidated wherever we have consolidated? Or do we need to make another investment? What's happening with our community partners? What does that look like? But I think that there is a really interesting synergy that we might be able to find in the meantime. So if there are no other, it sounds to me, if I understand this correctly, let me hear the trend lines on the council. There is an understanding of the need and efficiency of a consolidated campus. There is not an appetite right now for moving forward with building a civic campus at this point. Is that what I'm understanding correctly, Councilor Duquesne?
No, thank you, Mayor. No, what I mentioned earlier is the consolidated campus needs to be taken off the table. We are not in a position to even consider that. Divesting of properties, as mentioned earlier, we wouldn't have the funds to do it. We have the facilities funds, divesting of property, putting the money into the facilities funds to repair property that we already have. We already have a civic center. It's called City Hall. And we have the Community Development Department. Ashland is only 6.6 square miles, and we have technology. We can communicate very easily. I do not see the need for this. I understand when you talk about a master plan, it's not happening overnight. This master plan, it's not kicking it down the road. It's taking care of what we have, divesting of property, holding up and repairing what we have. Scott, you gave us a list of so many things that need to be repaired. It's low-hanging fruit. It's cost-effective. I believe that we can do this and hold on to City Hall and the Community Development Department. This, I believe, needs to be taken off the table, so that's not what I said at all.
Right, so what I was saying is the general feel of the council is that there is benefit to having our employees in one place together, but that there is not an interest in building a separate civic center at this point. Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to be very clear on what the direction is, because when I say, yeah, I think it'd be great if we could have that, that's not me saying I think staff should be spending time on looking at that as a possibility. I mean, I really believe that, and I said 2 years, and why I say that is, we're mid-biennium. I believe that we should be focused on next biennium's budget. We need to focus on stabilization. We need to figure out where the winds are blowing after we do said budget, and then mid-biennium for the next budget is a good chance to say, okay, here's where we are. Maybe we pick this conversation back up, and in the meantime, we should be investing as much as we can into getting City Hall back open. Now, again, it's an operational decision. If the city manager doesn't want to move staff in there, that's fine, but at least as council, we can say we put in the money and we did what was needed so that it is available if it is decided to be used.
Yeah, I think that that's what I'm hearing, right? Is we're not interested in designing out a civic center at this point and moving down that path.
Yeah, I want to make sure we're clear, because I don't want staff to not get clear direction and then they start working and spending time on what a civic center, and then they come back and we're like, yo, we didn't want to do that, and then we just wasted a bunch of energy and time. So that's all. I just want to be very clear.
So we're going to take this in stages, as we often do. Are we saying at this point that we want to pause on any kind of further development of the designs for a civic center? And then we're going to take up the question of Briscoe versus here, because there may be a way to release one of these two sites for future consideration as well. So that's what we want to stay is focused on the first one around just in general, do we want to put a pause on that? Councilor Hanson.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I differ from my colleagues a little bit, is that I think that the council would benefit from seeing a financial pathway towards a civic center. Personally, in conversations and reading, I believe campus would do us good. However, the pathway to get there is totally unclear. So I don't think it should be off the table. I think we should investigate all good ideas, and as part of this investigation, I wouldn't get too far down the road before we really need to see how we would pay for it. So I don't think it should be off the table. I think this council would benefit from that option and a plan to get us there, and I think it would be short-sighted to just put it off the table.
So, Scott, I see we have a new slide.
So, in thinking about how to convey some of this information, there's one box on this flow chart on each side, which I think is super important to pay attention to. So there's the option for what we're presenting basically is a civic complex in the future at Briscoe School or 90 North Mountain. Those are the two locations. And the city manager said, if there's one that you don't want at all if we could take that on the table, that opens up.
Yeah, we'll take that up next.
Yeah. So, and my thinking of this is that under the first box, under each option is to develop the implementation plan. how do we move forward? What does that look like? We already know it's going to be multiple phases, just based on the ORW information about how to, improve a structure, relocate staff here, move them here. There's all sorts of phases associated with each site development plan. We know there's going to be phases with that. We know there's going to be phases with City Hall improvement, what that looks like. There's going to be phases and timelines with the divestment of property and the income you receive. So in my mind, this is a kind of a living document that staff would develop and bring to the council on what are the first initial steps? What's the next domino? What happens after that? And that gets evolved over a couple-year period based on these discussions and based on the financial status and things of that nature. And this is where council would, have that policy say and standpoint, whatever touch point intervals kind of we establish that make sense, based on the budget and staffing capacity moving forward. We generally knew that even in the best case scenario, this would be a 5 to 10 year process. If council just green lighted, go in that direction, just because of what it takes to get from A to B on these large scale projects. So, and kind of that, I would think about that. What do you think is the most important first bullet in that implementation plan? And what would be the second? And then how can, what direction can you give staff, clear direction, that would help us outline that as a plan to bring back to the council for a discussion, and how we can mold in kind of the divestment and what the financial business case would look like. And that gives us time to have that discussion with other community partners as things unwind a little bit. But also in that plan, if the council direction is to fix some of these facilities with divestment money, we would develop recommendations on what we think is a staff priority for those facilities. I can tell you here that the locker rooms and restrooms at the service center are too small and overutilized right now. That would be a huge priority to expand, those services here at that building. Potentially remodeling the community development building or adding a second story. There's all these flexible options that we could look at. It's dependent, in my mind, of some formal level of direction from the council on how I can develop that and bring it back for a discussion.
So in terms of, as we think about the phasing then, the council could say that there's interest potentially in a civic campus, but not making a formal commitment to do that. Maybe an initial phase allows for that option of a civic campus, but maybe it allows for other things as well, depending on how things develop. Because what I'm hearing is a lot of concern about our current financial reality, the current economy, the uncertainty that we're all facing right now. But there is a potential to phase this so that we could get further down the road before any final decisions are made, as long as we protect the assets that we would need for a civic center. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a significant amount of time till you get to that middle box.
Okay,
that
great.
middle green box.
Councilor Dale.
Yeah, and I understand the uncertainty, but Scott, I'm still having trouble with this. So I understand that you're not going to have a number that's even close to being locked in, because you got to go through all the steps and you got to go through all the things and the multi-year thing. But I kind of, just in my mind, the way I separate this into two buckets is, number one, let's hypothetically assume that we have all the money in the world and we have a blank check and we can do whatever. Okay. What I would want to know between these two particular ones in this case, because it's on the screen, is which one's better if you could just write a check for one, right? Because then I got to know, well, what is the high level amount of these? Like, what are we looking at? Like, I go shopping for a home. I mean, I know that I'm going to be within some sort of range, but like, there's a difference between a $500,000 house and a $3 million house. I don't know which one. I mean, we're looking to eliminate things right now to be able to give you guys a clearer path to something. And what I'm hearing is we're still kind of like, we don't know the answer relative to the budget and the cost until we get farther. So if there's something that you could help us understand, and if you could just remind me, because we've had a lot of numbers here, are these relatively equal in cost, high level 50,000 foot view? Let's start with that question.
I would say, so ORW looked at the Briscoe as part of the feasibility report, and I believe the 2018 construction number was 15 million.
Okay.
Based on just adding the square footage to 90 North Mountain, I think you're looking at that $20 million range for the new community development building, the addition to the warehouse frontage, and then also the administration building behind the Grove at that $600 a square foot. And that's not including all of the, renovations to the service center area and things of that nature. I think the Briscoe location would be significantly costlier now, just based on an inflationary impact. To get to the first point of your question, from a staff perspective, I think generally we all concur that the 90 North Mountain location would best serve us operationally, and would be able to combine more staff into one location. Even at Briscoe, you're not going to get all of the staff here. You're still going to have the service center area and these buildings, and the Grove is part of that. So you still have kind of double the facilities, whereas here the expansion gets rid of the community development building need, 22,000 square foot. It gets rid of the city hall need and brings all those staff members to that central location with a few satellites, no matter what is going to happen. But the main body of the workforce would be housed here.
So let me see if I can distill that into one sentence here that I can wrap my head around, which is, you said that the North Mountain campus would be approximately 25% more prior to any of the stuff that would now need to happen at Briscoe, and that Briscoe really doesn't solve our needs anyway relative to staffing, despite the number of what it is. That's what I heard.
Yeah, generally Briscoe doesn't solve all
Okay.
the complexity of the campus issue, whereas this does. It creates another issue with circulation, but that's something that we can resolve through the engineering phase.
So for me, I would just cross Briscoe off the list, and then I'll come back to the 90 North Mountain later.
We're going to have that. That's where we're at now, is to have a conversation about if either one of these sites are ones that we would like to direct staff to stop looking at. Scott, can you go back a slide to where we have both of those up? We can see both of the options. Councilor Sherrill and then Councilor Kaplan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Scott, for sitting up here and taking hard questions. I brought this up last time as well, like it's not just cost, it's value. So which of the two potential options for a civic center, if either, bring more value to the citizen than they're getting right now in old buildings?
So in my opinion, the service center would bring more value from a parking and circulation standpoint relative to Briscoe for services. Just for staff parking and some community use parking, we would have to do a parking structure on that site relative to having surface level parking and space existing here to support the parking demand and the impact. We're also not in a direct residential neighborhood here, whereas Briscoe is in a direct residential neighborhood. And then our impact potentially in both locations reduces the parking impact of staff in downtown or adjacent to downtown at the Briscoe facility.
That makes sense. Can I follow up?
Go ahead.
I'm thinking more like the citizen. Like, is it going to mean that utility billing is open more than a few hours twice a week? Is it going to mean that community development doesn't close early now? Like, what value do we get for the money? Because right now we're seeing increased prices of services while we reduce operational time to serve the citizen. And if we have one of these two options, does that change at all?
So the 90 North Mountain location would allow for more cross-training because we'd all be located here. So right now, since we're dispersed, we have front counter people kind of throughout the city. Having them in one area allows for more cross-training between those individuals, would allow for more service hours.
So we would potentially have more availability of staff to the public with a building that has everybody in it. That helps to hear. Thanks.
I'd also think too about, right now citizens have to go downtown to community development, to this site for electric, potentially to finance. So it's 3 locations if you're a developer potentially that you're visiting to get everything that you need. And so I think in terms of kind of the idea of a one-stop shop. A consolidated campus anywhere adds a little bit of value for services generally.
Totally, I agree 100%. I mean, that's tremendous value. It makes a lot of jobs a lot easier. My worry is that right now with current spending, we can't keep those doors open, and now we're going to try to find $20 million or $20 million minus the delta of what we sell, and it just seems like it becomes a larger problem to solve financially.
Yeah, I would think about this a little bit because, we are seeing a lot of change happening with a lot of our institutions. I think one way to think about this, I think it's helpful if we can eliminate Briscoe, if that's the direction we want to go in. But one thing I would think about is kind of at the policy level, is council interested in, the idea of kind of a one-stop shop or thinking about operations in terms of adding the most value to the public as a policy decision to kind of help guide when we're thinking about opportunities that may come up for putting staff in buildings that aren't necessarily ones we have to construct. I think that would be helpful because if the policy direction is we want to remain in the location we are at, great. But the policy direction is we want to ensure that we're providing the maximum value to our citizenry and make it easy for people to get, what they need to get done with the city, that's a different policy decision. So I think thinking about it like that at a high level helps staff as we see opportunities that might come up in the future of potentially consolidating staff at a central location, even if it's not something we build our own, to be able to bring that back to council. That would be helpful because right now we are looking at leasing a building for finance. We obviously have the administration staff we're going to need to deal with. And so, as we continue to disperse throughout the city, as we find workspace for people, I think that would help staff in terms of thinking things moving forward.
Councillor Kaplan?
Once again, speaking on Councillor Kaplan's behalf. I said before, I don't see in the ORW report a business case for a consolidated campus. To my mind, there are service quality benefits from having public-facing staff co-located, and there may be operational efficiencies by facilitating staff working together within and across departments. So I'd like to see a clearer statement about who needs to be co-located and why. On the other hand, who won't ever be co-located because they're doing specialized work that requires them to be located elsewhere. Example, at the wastewater treatment plant, water treatment plant, parks and rec facilities, etc. ? Without this analysis, I'm not clear about what size and capabilities we need in a civic campus. Sabrina just answered part of my question. Ultimately, can we get more specific about what specific jobs are highest priority for co-location?
Okay. Thank you. So let's stay on this conversation about whether this council wants to, from a policy standpoint, release either one of these options. Well, we've heard from you, Councillor Dale, that you're no longer interested in Briscoe. Let's stay on that question. It is the one that staff and our consultants have said is not the way forward. That's the same conclusion that the council came to 6 years ago. Was we looked closely at Briscoe and kind of had that same decision. I would be happy to release Briscoe from the possibilities. And so let's go around and just see what people think about that. Whoever would like to start. Councillor Sherrill?
Yeah, I would like to see that released, and it probably has the highest redevelopment value too, which is a benefit for starting the facilities maintenance fund potentially.
Right, and so what that would be another process. The council will take up a conversation later if we decide to release it.
It's the process we're speaking of, correct?
Right, but in terms of like for the highest value or whatever, that question will be later.
Okay, well, I'm using the value to make my decision, period, because we're going to divest in it. Let's get the most bang for our
out of
buck.
it. Okay, and so Councillor Dale?
Ditto.
Okay, we can just go in a circle if that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Bloom?
Yeah, I mean, I look at all these properties and I think there's value in divesting of them. So, yes, but in no way does that reflect my opinion on option 2 either.
Right. Councillor Duquesne?
I have a question regarding Briscoe. What happens to the Head Start that's in there now? Do they get a heads up? Do they know that we're going to sell the property? What happens in that
So I think
case?
to clarify, we're just simply taking it off the table for a consolidated campus. There's a whole other process of divestment that would be a different
But
question for council.
if this does come up for divestment, if this body says, yes, let's sell it because it makes sense to me as well, what happens to OCDC? These are our kids too. Where would they go? When
So
would they
that
get
lease is up
notice?
in, I think, another year. So as that time frame comes up, we'll be looking for council to decide kind of how they would like to move forward. I don't know if they're going to renew their lease. I can't speak to that, so I don't have the answer to that. But they would be given notice if we're looking to divest of the building.
That's plenty of time. Okay, thank you. Yes.
So you would like to take Briscoe off the table for this conversation? Is that what you meant by yes? Counselor Duquesne? Yes. Okay. Counselor Hanson?
I think option 2 has legs. I'd love to see the B Street yard utilized for its greatest and highest good. I'm not quite sure what that is. Maybe it is Civic Center. So yes, release Briscoe. I think that has been fully vetted as not not a great option. And I would love to see option 2 developed with some real bones around a financial model and a plan that way. So yes, Briscoe off the table. It's my vote too.
Counselor Kaplan?
Council Clapton says yes to release Briscoe.
Okay, so we have we have consensus. We have made a significant, I think, bit of staff direction here because releasing one full site is an important part of all of this. So good work. Let's keep going and see if we can drill down a bit more. The next question becomes, what is the next step in this? Now that we've said Briscoe's off the table, what are the next steps that we have that we would like to have staff bring to us? What are the next decisions that we have? We've got the question of how much energy or to what extent do we want to price out what that civic center at this location would be as part of the larger conversation. I've heard counselors say not interested in pulling the trigger on it now, but also have heard people say, what is it? Let's take a look at it. Let's cost it out and get high, scope, sort of magnitude scope numbers for what that would look like, and then have more conversation at that point. So where should we go with this? Councilor Dale?
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so this comes to the next question I had is, do we have a rough cost? Like how close are we of a confidence interval? Or can we get 85, 90% to a high level amount of a starting point? And maybe let's just be rhetorical for just a second, Scott, and this will be for Sabrina too. So if I understand our decision tree here, it would be something like this. I'm just picking a random number. Doesn't matter for the sake of discussion. 30 million, 25, whatever it is. Option A, we make no changes to our service or anything else. There's no opportunity cost. You just go out and it's a bond and it's just paid for in full or whatever it is, close enough. I understand that there's going to be some implementation and changes and whatever. So that's option A, and you can ask the community if that's what they want to do. Option B is going to be, okay, well, what services are we going to trade off within our budget to be able to back that number down, okay? And then we have to ask that. Now, we can do that as part of this budget process, correct? I mean, we can look at this. That's where I'm still struggling with the fact that I don't know if I can even say yes to this. I understand the value, but you also have to ask citizens, like, what do I want to pay for having a place open, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, or whatever that is. But that's where I keep seeing this kind of keep coming back to the budget question, which is we can pencil in a number and get relatively close. That's why I was asking and saying, this is what the budget looks like if you do this. Without a bond, with a bond. I mean, it's just filling out a number. I mean, I'm not trying to get staff to do a bunch of work, but I'm just saying, before we go down to all the different boxes, and it could be this, and this is what it is in phase, we can just say, this is what it looks like in a budget, and this is what we're going to have to come up with, or not. Or what are we going to have that we would need to as part of the budget process that we are going to choose as an opportunity cost to put into facilities fund? I mean, this is just a basic question. So that's where I'm still confused about whether I can say yes or no to this yet. if that makes sense. And I know that was kind of a question-ish, so I'm sorry I turned that from a rhetorical question to a rhetorical question to a statement. But do you have ballpark it?
We could go back to the table and get a ballpark number. What we would have to do is take all of the information from McKinstry's study, from the maintenance replacement life cycle costing that they put together, sum that along with their per square footage costs. And then most likely what we would do from the staff side is, have a conversation with a Vitus or a Droid or an S&B James, and here's what we're looking at from project costing. Here's this information. Are we in the ballpark? Have a gut check from, company that does this, and then bring that number back to the council. But that, that's the only way I can get you in the ballpark, is to kind of combine.
How long would that take?
With everything else going on?
Right. Yeah, with everything else going on.
Yeah, I mean, to do that and be confident, it would probably be the earliest, the second meeting in July, or the only meeting in July would be probably, in my mind, the earliest, just to make sure that we gut check it and, blind review of it from another entity.
Thank you.
So that brings me to another question, which in my mind, these are all preliminary questions. At some point, we have to go out into the community, have a town hall kind of gathering, somewhere, share what these different options would be. There is a lot more interest in this question than what we see here in terms of people who've come to a study session. And at some point, the community is going to be asked to invest in some way into whatever the pathway is. So in my mind, we are setting up the bigger conversation for the community by asking for this information, right? To get what is the ballpark figure? What is it that these different options would do? We know that Briscoe is not an option anymore, but there are a couple of other options that would still be there. I think you mentioned a couple, Councilor Dale. We just go through and build it, and move everything the way we want to move it, and pay for it. What does that look like? What does it look like to repair where we are and keep all of our people scattered where they are? Or potentially do something different where we have some kind of consolidation and change the function of City Hall in some way from what it has been, right? There's a couple of different options. Does it make sense for us to start working towards a public conversation with the community that is not necessarily in this room, that is more of a all-comers kind of discussion? Councilor Duquesne?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this does merit a discussion. Something that was mentioned earlier, that at the end of the day, the people are going to vote on this. It's not too late to get this on the November ballot. Do you want this or don't you want this? Do you want to sell City Hall or don't you want to sell City Hall? Do you want to have a civic center or don't you? That would allow Scott enough time to get that ballpark figure, because everybody's going to want to know what the bottom line is. We still have time to get it out there in November. Let the people put their thoughts on it too. And I saw that 159 people answered that survey. I look at 159 people, we have 21,000 and change in the city. I am not going to make a decision that 159 people answered a survey. I understand that it came in strong for a civic center. I would like to hear from the citizenry. Put it on the ballot, let the people vote for it, bring it back, because something that I saw here I wanted to share. In the council packet, it says, council discussion will allow staff the opportunity to develop the 2027-2029 budget from this discussion that we have regarding the Civic Center. And like you said, Scott, with everything that we have to do right now, I do not want time to be spent on a Civic Center that we cannot afford. When I look at the school district, they are looking to levy. We have too many things out there. So I don't support a civic center at all. However, I say put it out there. We have time. Let the people vote on it.
Well, they will. And if there's going to be something of this size move forward, they'd have to.
Yeah, but they can do it in November this
Councilor
year.
Dale.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and so along those same lines, so would it be something like this? So Scott will get us a number in the July-ish. I still stand by what we were talking about earlier, which is we need to fund a facilities fund, irrespective of what we do here. We need to start working toward filling a fund that has not happened in years. That needs to happen, and that needs to happen stat. We need to invest in infrastructure. So what I'm expecting, and what I hope this council will do, is that we will be working towards, and staff, as we put together the budget, that will include a lot of investment in a facilities fund. And we will have those discussions of how that looks. And then on top of that, we can look at the number that Scott comes back, and we can ask, as Councilor Duquesne said, here's what the number would be, and we could put that on the on the ballot in November, or we will then have a better picture of, after we've created the budget. Sabrina, I think you could bring it back, we'll call it August-ish, and say, I think this is what it's going to look like if we do that, and maybe I'm rushing too much, but you could say, well, we want to take X amount of that facilities fund and knock that off the price of a bond, say. I don't know if that's a good idea yet, because I think we need to be continuing to invest in all of the facilities now and in the future and have that fund. But I think that's kind of the easiest path to getting a correct and accurate and most informed decision. That's what I would think.
Councilor Bloom?
Yeah, that was interesting. I wasn't expecting somebody to throw out putting it on the November ballot. So I stand by my statement. I think that we should just completely table this conversation until after the next biennial budget is completed and adopted, and then we'll know where we are and we can have that conversation. That said, alternatively, sure, let's go ahead and put out a number and say this is what it's going to be and put it on the November ballot, and we'll see how that goes. I think that would be a mistake if the goal is to develop a civic campus, because I don't think that'll pass at all. But sure, we can certainly get the numbers if we want and look at that. But I contend I don't think that this is a decision that this council should be making. I think it's a future council in the next 2 years that should be having this conversation, where we can actually maybe demonstrate to the community that financially this all makes sense and that there is a very clear pathway to do it. We've built up our facility fund, we've figured out some of our financial policy issues, and then move forward cleanly that way and actually make sure that the people trust us with that decision.
Councilor Kaplan?
Yeah, speaking a statement on behalf of Councilor Kaplan, I think the next step is the business case analysis I requested before. Can staff be more specific about what jobs are highest priority for co-location and why? That way, we'll be in a better position to right-size the consolidated campus and be prepared to take advantage of opportunities that may come up.
So let's answer that particular question. Councilor Kaplan had his business case question, wanting to understand better who needs to be co-located, who needs to be kept in their own space because of their operational needs. Is there general interest in getting that information, that specific information from staff? Councilor Dale.
Can I ask a clarifying question,
Sure.
Mayor? Scott and Sabrina, remind me how, because I do completely support what Councilor Kaplan is saying. The question is how much of that has been done already, if any, in all of the preliminary planning? And I'm drawing a blank if what Councilor Kaplan is asking has been completed, even in minor part. And if the answer is no, I mean, that's fine. I'm in full support of what Councilor Kaplan's asking. I was just wondering.
At general high level, yes, but I think it can be refined to a better statement for the council to digest.
Sure.
Going through 100 pages of reporting and figures and trying to assimilate that into one.
Right. Yeah, I don't need the cubicle design.
Yeah.
But I'll take the high level report. I think
Yeah.
we're asking for. Yeah, thanks.
So let's see if we have general agreement on having that information come back to us in an effort to right-size the solution going forward. Thoughts from councilors? I see head nods. Is there interest in having that information come back? Councilor Bloom.
I'd certainly be interested in having it, but I would caution in how useful it would be. Again, going to the 27-29 biennium budget, we don't know what our FTE is going to be funded at. We don't know what that number is. And so we're getting an idea of what consolidation would look like and co-location would look like when some of those positions might not exist. And that's just the reality.
Well, I think to that point, the question is which departments need to be near each other or which types of operations. They may have fewer people in them, but the question is where are the synergies with the operations? What does that look like from both a staffing standpoint and also a customer service standpoint is the way I'm looking at it. Because I think those will fluctuate. They'll go up and down. So let's see if we can get, I know that Councilor Kaplan would like to see this information, so he doesn't have to chime in, but has he given you additional statement?
More is coming, the 3 dots are moving.
The 3 dots are moving, so we will get him back in. Councilor Hanson.
I have a question. I mean, it seems as though, Scott, you had a presentation about option 1, option 2. Narrowing now at number 2, do those buildings have some of this built into it already? Like, you know, I'm wondering if you had a presentation that we're missing, and if so, if some of this information was in that. So I know that there were buildings drawn on that map, and that there's departments, and you know, there's already some thought into this. Could you, like, maybe want to take the time to hear the presentation and get the download from the information that's already been presented there? Is there good info in there to share about who needs to be where and why?
You know, I definitely can refine that for that next meeting, but, you know, generally the 90 location gets a majority of staff here and all of the services here. So you would have, you know, finance here, UB here, you would have legal, administration.
Yeah, but like, can we blow up that image and what were you thinking?
Yeah.
Like we're asking for this information, and I feel like a lot of it's there.
Yeah. And so for that next presentation, let me refine it a little bit more, because this is kind of really that high level.
Okay.
But from a service level standpoint, generally everything would exist at 90 North Mountain. We would all be co-located. And so if you need to get a building permit and talk with AFN, you know, from a customer standpoint, it would all be here. You know, instead of going to community development and then coming here and then potentially going to start your utility account at the finance building at 2245. You know, that's where we're talking about our operational efficiencies. A portion of this is also to divest of the senior center and locate those services into the Grove building in the long run as well. So recreation would have not only recreation here to a certain level, but senior services would be here as well from a service standpoint. And then, you know, just speaking as a staff member, we often have discussions with other staff members, legal, city manager, you know, and we do have the ability to Zoom or Teams, but sometimes it's more efficient and easier to work through things face to face than virtually. And so being able to walk from here to there to have a chat with the city attorney, you know, on a subject is kind of more efficient some of the time as well.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, I was hoping to get a little bit more, but you know, we're cart before the horse a little bit. So yes, I concur with Kaplan and the other colleagues in the room saying, yeah, we'd like to know what you have in mind, and relative to the B Street yard over there, what does that look like? How many stories would we vision? You know, could we multi-purpose and have, you know, maybe some housing? I don't know. What are your ideas and what are your thoughts in addition to the needs and developmental constraints and all that stuff?
And we talked about actually B Street, if you do build a new community development building, that you would have ground floor commercial as an option and second story offices in that area. And, you know, from an impact to the area itself, just like other buildings in the downtown, you know, have ground floor commercial and upper story residential. Us, it would be upper story office space where you would access community development and whoever else gets stationed in that building. Some of those locations, you know, we would have to talk about specifically in the implementation step on the staff basis of where we thought, you know, in the final end game, all staff should be located for efficiency of operation. So that's one of the things that we would hash out kind of moving forward through this process as well.
Councilor Bloom?
Oh, yeah, I just, I think it'd be helpful for everybody and folks watching at home. If you go to the January 14th agenda, the packet in there, it has the full 205 page report from ORW that actually does zoom in and provide a lot more details, a little bit more visually stimulating than a slide from this far away.
Yeah, and there's 2 slides in the presentation that were attached to that show the phasing program for each option as well. So how you would phase staff relocation, how you would phase construction, what building when. And part of this is really all triggered on the Hardesty property development because that allows a different use of B Street, whether it be for a civic use or whether it be to divest of that property and have it developed as commercial or residential. So eliminating Briscoe kind of, the option goes, do we keep community development as a satellite? And then divest the B Street? So those are some of those implementation questions that the council would have to answer as well moving forward.
Yeah, as they get to them over
Yes,
time,
yes.
right? So I think it seems that in this path, we can set a general direction, knowing that as the world changes and as we move down the time frame, the council can make different choices if different opportunities come available. So what we have right now are 2 direction elements for staff. One is to release Briscoe as an option. The second is to provide more detailed information on which departments need to be co-located, what would be kept separate, that kind of thing. Essentially, what is the problem we're trying to solve with this co-location question? One, we're almost out of our official time. I think it is likely we are not going to get to the second conversation today. So if with council's approval, I'd like to just postpone that second item. We do have some additional time to talk through what should be in the council budget before we get to the budget making time. If that sounds okay, we can stay on the conversation of our facilities. Councilor Dale.
Yeah, just to add one thing, Mayor, is my understanding with his direction, in addition to what you said, relative to what Councilor Kaplan brought up, was also that the specific direction that Scott was going to bring us back a number in July.
Right. So, and I think that is the next piece that we're looking for is what are those next elements of research that we want to do? We have the Civic Center as it's outlined right now. One of the things that I wrote up and put in the packet is a conversation about something that includes consolidation somewhere else, wherever that might be, plus still fixing City Hall for civic uses. And so I think that's a conversation. Do we want to take a look at that in more, in some sort of greater detail that would essentially allow us to move on City Hall while we're waiting to see what happens in the wider world? So in that version, the community could answer the question about what does it want for City Hall, and we could potentially still start to consolidate our staff somewhere, depending on what opportunities arrive, without necessarily pulling the full trigger on a civic center. So it would be a different option. Do we want to research it? Councilor Bloom.
The only thing, and this is something to maybe just, maybe you can send back to Johan, is, I'm curious when we talk about the ballot, right, is like, I don't think that we can put on the ballot, hey, are you interested in a civic center? Like, that's a poll, right? It needs to be something very specific. So also the same with City Hall, we need to figure out how specific, are we saying selling? Are we saying turn? Like, we need to be very specific with that language.
If I may.
Well,
so
and
that we can better understand, right?
Yeah, well, and that's why what I'm thinking is that if we cost out the Civic Center with just the Civic Center and selling City Hall and selling the ComDev building, could we also cost out this kind of hybrid option and then potentially cost out the version of nobody moves, we stay scattered, we just try to limp along with our existing buildings, and then we actually have a public engagement process and get people's feedback and find out what they want to do. Because putting anything on the ballot, you only put an actual bond measure on the ballot, and the council would want to make sure that whatever it puts in front of the community is what the community is actually wanting to do and will support. So that's what I'm thinking, is that these questions are really about setting up the community engagement process to find out what the community wants to do. So are those 3 reasonable options to ask staff to help us cost out? Ish? Councilor Sherrill.
Yeah, I don't see a scenario where spending millions of dollars, regardless of staff efficiency, is going to bring a higher service level at a similar cost to the citizen. And I need to say that because I don't, as much as I like the idea of getting more information, when we ask for more information, it's just like, that's saying no to working on keeping the water to get us through this season and keeping the lights on and keeping the staff that we have. So no, I don't agree with all three of those pillars.
Okay. Councillor Dale?
Yeah, I think I appreciate what Councillor Sherrill said, and that's very important. It's something that I learned early on, which is what are the trade-offs of staff's time when we ask them to do X, what are we giving up for Y? And so I appreciate that, because thank you for bringing that. Yeah, I'm still, I mean, if the number is something that you can do easily, fine, great. I still I'm still kind of laser focused on, really just interested in this budget biennium and seeing what we can do with our existing facilities and the funding for that.
Okay. So can we contract for some additional time? We're at 7 o'clock. Can we have 15 more minutes? Are there any concerns about having 15 more minutes?
I move to extend the study session to 7:15.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Councillor Bloom?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how much time. I just feel like it's fruitless. In my opinion, I mean, I stand by what I said. I don't think that this should be a conversation until next biennium, after the next budget is passed. So I just think that we're spinning our wheels, having staff go down a route that ultimately, at least if it comes to a vote for me, I would be voting no anyways until after next biennium. So I would say it's just a waste of time.
Any other thoughts?
Agreed. I don't support this. Now is not the time to do it. Even divesting of properties, we don't have money to pay for this. Divesting of properties, I'll say it again, I feel like needs to go in the facilities fund to repair what we have. And so I don't support this. I think it's a waste of time. We have too many other things that are important looking at this budget process and what we need to look at to get to the black and pull ourselves out of the hole. I don't support this civic center.
Councillor Hanson?
Yeah, I still would like to see the development of this plan to see what costs and ideas for funding are, and in the meantime, keeping up on divesting of properties and building that fund and getting maintenance in. I think it all needs to happen. You know, true, this is another council's big decision on the big picture, but we got to start the work now, and we've got to do something about City Hall in the short term and getting our staff squared away and safe.
Councillor Kaplan, if he has anything, but just to give you a heads up, Councillor Kaplan, if you do want to say something, we'll give you some space, but I know you have to type first. Okay.
I have a question, if you don't mind. Mayor. Yeah. So along these same lines, so I would ask Sabrina and Scott. So what I'm hearing is let's just say these plans get shelved for 2 years. Obviously, the cost will be higher in 2 years, understand, but if they're shelved for 2 years while we build a facility plan, build a facility fund, work through divesting of property and so forth, what are the adverse effects, if any, other than just cost, of revisiting this in the next biennium? Like, the plans don't change, really. I mean,
No, I think you've made good progress by eliminating Briscoe. I think, if we want to pause this conversation, we still need to look to divest of property.
Yep.
And so we would be coming back to do that. I think, there's, has been mentioned here several times tonight, there may be an opportunity for consolidation in a building that we don't necessarily need to construct. And I think staff would recommend being aware and looking for those opportunities, because right now we are very inefficient with finance and legal in one part of the city and admin in another. And so I think there is potential that we could achieve the goal of a consolidated campus without having to construct it potentially. And so I think that's where my policy question about, I think Councilmember Sherrill is getting at it is, is there a way that we can add value to the community that we don't have right now? And I do think that is pulling at least some of our staff back together potentially, even if this is shelved for a while, just being open to that opportunity and that discussion, because what we're going to continue to see is, issues with our buildings. And so we are looking to fund the facilities fund because we're going to have to repair buildings that were not on the divestment plan. And that needs to happen regardless of a consolidated campus, right? And probably should have happened prior to this moment. And so there's a lot of moving parts. And so I think we've made good progress by eliminating Briscoe from this conversation, because that helps us at least be aware that we need to have that conversation about what we want to do with that property then, because we're not holding it for the campus. But I do think that's, a policy discussion that council should have is, right now there's kind of this split, like, no change, stay in the buildings that we own and fix them up, but that still doesn't really add a lot of value in terms of efficiency and operations. Or do we need to be orientating towards looking at efficiency of operations, because that does remove potentially, staff positions or adds more value to the community by making business with the city easier to do.
Mm-hmm. So that's earlier on when I had said that there was interest in the operational efficiencies of consolidation. I think it was misunderstood to be that we want a specific civic center, a new civic center built. So from a policy standpoint, I think it is imperative that we answer the question today of, is this council supportive of efforts to consolidate our staff in the meantime in ways that aren't new construction or major remodels, right? So that if opportunities arise, our staff understands that the council is interested in moving in whatever way we can early towards that consolidation. Is that a fair assumption? Yes, Councilor Duquesne.
I am in favor of the staff being able to work in closer proximity. I am not in favor of adding additional costs, going out renting someplace when we do have city properties that can accommodate everyone. Once again, we have modern technology and we're 6.6 square miles. And I do believe that there are places that have been suggestions given where the staff can relocate, and if it's in a place that we don't have to pay for, I'm all for it. Okay. And some staff might be able to work from home too.
Councilor Kaplan?
Speaking for Councilor Kaplan, I'm interested in moving forward with the decision about how and how much to repair City Hall for a future civic use. Also, some of ORW's suggestions for some internal reworking of the ComDev building for greater efficiency. Also, refer back to my previous comment about process changes being part of the business case analysis based on initiatives already planned or underway. The business case also includes process changes expected over the next decade, some of which are already on the horizon through technology improvements.
Okay. All right. So we're going to take it back to this question of general policy direction to staff to be looking at ways to consolidate in the near term with opportunities that come up around town. Is there general agreement to that?
Good question, but
Yeah.
Should they investigate these opportunities if they see them?
If something comes up and it looks like it could work, bring it back to us. But I don't spend too much time going and searching. Like, you've got a lot on your plate. Worry about what you got on your plate. If an opportunity shows up, great.
Right. And I think operational efficiency is one of the things that they're working on as operations. Councilor Dale?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was just going to say that I think from a policy standpoint, step number one is for us to figure out how to identify the buildings that are certainly not going to be divested of, so that we can build that facilities fund. As far as how you create operational efficiencies, that's your wheelhouse. As far as our job is to make sure that we're in lockstep with building those funds for you, and then to the extent that involves council, sure, we can have a discussion, things like community center, whatever it is. But other than that, that's what the city manager's office do, and our job is to be able to get existing is to get funds for it using existing facilities. Go ahead.
Councilor Stroh?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I completely support keeping our options open and always looking for a better deal to add more value. What I'm not in favor of is during that search, reducing services. So we don't need to consolidate everybody to give good services right now that we currently have. We pay for a building where UB is there. Let's open them up so people can go pay their bill. We're already not filling positions in ComDev that are open. We're reducing our hours. We're already compressing services. So I just don't want the two to get confused, because I'm in full support of finding a better building where we can cross-train and work and have synergies that we don't have now, but not at the cost of services in today's world.
Okay. So do you have the policy element you need there? Yes. So we have 5 minutes left. I didn't swing in on that last round when people were talking about what they wanted to see kind of going forward. One of the things I think we have to answer sooner rather than later is what happens to City Hall, because that is linked directly to the longer term plan of Civic Center. Maybe it's a both end, maybe it's a one or the other, but I think at some point this council is going to have to make a general direction that says it's this. And then as the years go through and we make progress on different things, those decisions might change in some fashion with future councils, but at some point we have to set a direction, and the City Hall issues are forcing that conversation now. So I wouldn't be so interested in waiting until the next biennial budget, because these are not things we're going to fix in the biennial budget. These are capital expenditures that budget cannot manage on its own anyway. And so my thinking is that we need to come to a general direction as a community and see where we can get in this newer space and deal with the facilities maintenance fund and get that in place in this upcoming budget. That all makes sense. The divestment makes sense. All of those pieces that are already underway make sense, moving to Hardesty, all of that. And then get out to the other side and kind of see where we're at on the path. Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, I really appreciated what Councilor Kaplan said, and I would like this council to direct staff to prepare the necessary budget materials to fund and proceed with immediate repairs to the existing City Hall building, including the safety, roof, electrical, HVAC, water heater, and pest control items identified in the repair estimates.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Duque.
Thank you. I agree with that, and in looking at repairing City Hall, I would also like to look, when we go out to get the RFPs to repair the roof, I would like to be able to go to Blesser and see if we can get an RFP from them and look at and use the warrants that we're still under warranty and see how we can cut some cost. So any way that we can cut cost, I'm all for that, and I do support the repair of City Hall, but we have 12 years left on this. Let's take advantage of it.
Councilor Hansen.
I have to disagree with my colleague. As a quasi roofer myself, I think I understand the position that our roof is in. I think it just needs to be like redone in its totality. We're kicking the can down the road, I believe. I think, and then for this council, my vote is to get the deed situation squared away with City Hall and to look at divesting of City Hall, because I don't share the compelling argument of that as an anchor building for our community. I think it's been a historical piece that we've utilized, and I'm thankful for it. And I know that there's a real strong contingency of Ashlanders that want to keep it. But when I look at the 21,000 people that are here, I think the majority of constituents will want not to invest in that, will want to invest in something different. I believe this Civic Center might be part of that, or it might be something else that's more creative within the suite of properties we already own. But for my vote, I would say we should divest of City Hall and use those funds in the in our capital fund.
So I think that's a bigger conversation than what we're going to get to tonight. We don't have formal motions and votes at this point, but I think we can maybe start our next conversation with where we dropped off here. We've got a nice sort of pitch question in front of us for us to take up again at a future point. But I think we've made some good progress today, giving some guidance in terms of the pathways forward. I think it's a big deal to be able to take one full property off of the list. And this is difficult work. It is long-term permanent investment questions. It matters. It matters to the future residents and the current residents, and a lot more people care about this. This is what we learned the last time we had the City Hall question come up, is it was very quiet until the council made a decision, and then it wasn't. Because that's when people found out what the conversation was, and that's when we found out what that civic anchor meant to people in terms of what it feels like for them to live here. So just for us to be aware of that as we go through that rest of that process. But I think we've done good work here tonight, and the meeting is adjourned.